Welcome back to Economic Indicators Part 2. In our last video, we talked about our 4 economic indicators, and we also discussed the business cycle. So it might be helpful for you to draw the business cycle over in the margins as we discuss this, because now you should be on the back side of your note sheet. So if you want to draw a small business cycle and label it real quick in the margins, that would be extremely helpful for you. When we start talking about economic policy, it will make a lot more sense, I promise. So when we talk about economic policy, there are 2 sets of people or 2 organizations that can create policy or make some kind of law that says kind of how we fix the economy and how we go about doing that. So the first type of policy we can have is called monetary policy, and the second type is fiscal policy. All right, so monetary policy is made by the Federal Reserve, so basically the bank's bank and the government's bank. And I will refer to this from here on out as the Fed, not the Feds, plural, but the Fed, singular, meaning the Federal Reserve. And fiscal policy is made by the President and Congress. So these 2 organizations have 2 completely different ways of trying to fix the economy. Now, the overall goal for both of them is to be able to fix the problems that we have in our economy, but they kind of take 2 different paths to the same destination. All right, the Federal Reserve is the bank's bank and the government's bank. So when you go to the bank and you receive an envelope full of money, you know every time that you go to the bank that the cash you get from the bank is going to be nice and crispy. It's never been creased at all. It's brand new. It smells brand new. It's great. Okay, it is. If you look at the date that it was issued or the batch number, it's going to be from 2018. All right, it's going to be nice and new. So this is where banks get their money after what's called the mint issues it. So if you've heard something be called mint condition before, the mint is where money gets printed, and it's where coins get stamped and created. So all of our currency, all of the cash or the change that you have in your pocket or laying around at the house is from the mint. And a bank gets their money from the mint. That's what happens when the Loomis truck or the Brinks truck comes and brings cash from the Federal Reserve. And it's also the government's bank. So this is our government's checking account. So when we borrow money from other countries or we pay them back, we don't write them a check from the State Employees Credit Union. We don't write them a check from PNC or Wells Fargo. We write them a check from the United States Federal Reserve. And also, like we talked about in Unit 8, talking about United States savings bonds. So those bonds that you can cash in $5,000, and in 20 years, your bonds have doubled in amount, so you get 10 grand back plus interest. That's where this is issued. So if you want to go get a savings bond, you have to go to the Federal Reserve, or the bank. Your local bank can likely get some for you from the Federal Reserve. All right, so there are 12 districts total for the Federal Reserve, and we are in the 5th district, which is based out of Richmond, so about 3.5 hours north of us. This is what the Federal Reserve looks like. Kind of looks like a prison. Someone asked me one time, can you rob this? No, that's not going to happen. All right, and this is the lady who runs the Fed. This is Janet Yellen, and she was appointed by the president, approved by the, I hope you know, because there's a question coming up, and also the board of directors. Right, so she can't run the entire Federal Reserve, the bank's bank and the government's bank. She can't run the bank of the entire United States by herself. She has to have some help. So she enlists 9 directors to help her do so, and they are also appointed by the president and approved by the Senate. All right, and when we talk about monetary policy, this is made by the Federal Reserve, so the bank's bank and the government's bank, so the big old bank of the U.S. The Fed is in charge of interest rates, so the amount of money that you're paying in interest on your house loan or your car loan or your student loan, all of that is from the Fed. The Fed tells you the range of interest rates you can charge for someone. They also dictate bank reserves, so how much money is on hand and in the vault. So let's say that we're talking about the State Employees Credit Union, and we've got 1,000 people who bank at the State Employees Credit Union over here in Winterville. And let's say that overall, that people who have a checking or a savings account, total, the CQ is worth $10 million. All right? Only about 15 or 20% of that is going to be in cash in the vault ready to go. At any point in time, I can go and ask them to close my accounts out and cash everything out that's in there. I have the power to do so because it is my money, and I can do that as someone who banks there. However, You don't need $10 million in cash in the vault at all times. That would make banks an even worse target for robbery than they are right now. So they're in charge of bank reserves, and they're also in charge of the amount of money that is printed. Right? So if our economy is not doing so well, we're not just going to print more money to give more people money. If we print more money, the value of our dollar is going to decrease. All right, so monetary policy, you can either raise or lower interest rates, you can raise or lower bank reserves, or you can raise or lower the amount of money that's printed. All right, I'd like you to put, you're listening, I would like you to put the word circulation, circulation, in your margin where it says questions, beside where you put the amount of money printed. This is called circulation. So not circulation of your blood or your oxygen, but the amount of money that is flowing around the United States in and out of people's hands. All right, so how does monetary policy work? You can either have loose policy or you can have tight policy. All right, and in terms of money, we use loose policy if the economy is not doing well. Because remember, think back to when we talked about John Keynes in the last video. He says that if the economy is not doing well, you're going to have to find a way to feed money into it in order to force it to do well. So if we want the economy to do better, we have to move some more money around. So we're going to print just a little bit more money and move it into circulation. We're going to lower the interest rate so that people have more money to spend. And we're going to lower the reserve requirements. That means that banks can take more money out of the vault and put it into people's hands. So loose policy, we kind of lower the amount that people have to spend, and if they have if they have more money in their hand, they're going to spend it, which is going to end up putting us into, which is going to end up helping our economy out. So we use loose policy if we are in a recession in our business cycle. So if you'll think back, I told you to draw just a little miniature business cycle. We want our recession to be as short as possible in terms of time. So what we're going to do to speed up our economy and get us out of a recession as fast as humanly possible, we are going to use loose policy. Look at them, killing it. All right, and on the opposite side, we can also use tight policy. This is used if the economy is doing well. So if we are in an expansion, we want that to last as long as humanly possible. So we want our expansion in our business cycle curve to be very, very long. All right, we want to increase as slowly and as steadily as possible. So we're trying to slow our economy down so that we can continue to go up as much as we can, because we know once we hit a peak, we're going to have to go back down into a recession again. We want our recession to be as short-lived as possible. So we're going to put less money into circulation, raise the interest rates, and raise the reserve requirements. So if we have less money in people's hands, they have less money to spend, which means our economy is going to slow down, and we are going to stay in that expansion for a longer amount of time. All right, so here's some practice. Decide if this is tight or loose. Go ahead and write that down. All right, so increasing the interest rate. If we raise the interest rate, that would be tight policy because there's less money in people's hands. Printing more money is loose policy. Increasing the bank reserves is tight. Changing the interest rate from 4.5% to 3% would be loose policy. You're trying to speed up the economy. Number 5, lowering the bank reserve requirement is loose policy, and issuing more money is also loose policy. All right, so on the other side, we have fiscal policy. Now, this is determined by Congress and the president, so we're going to leave the Fed behind. We're no longer talking about anything to do with banks. So Congress and the president can pass laws about our budget and about our taxes, and that is it. They can't mess with the banks, they can't mess with interest rates, and they cannot mess with how much money you have to put inside the bank at any point in time. The president and Congress can only fool with government spending and taxes. Okay, so we should go ahead and underline the C in fiscal and the C in Congress. So Congress, C, makes fiscal policy with a C. I know it's cheesy, but it'll help you on your test. All right, so review. Who designs the budget and passes it? What are appropriation bills and where do appropriation bills start? Hope you know, because there's a question coming up. All right, we know that the president designs or suggests the budget, Congress passes it, and appropriation bills have to do with money and are started in the House. So what can Congress can do to slow or speed the economy? They're not going to use tight and loose policy. They're going to either speed the economy up or slow it down. So here's how it works. If the economy is not doing well, they want to speed up the economy. The Fed, meanwhile, is going to use loose policy, all right, and Congress is going to work together with them, lower taxes so they have more money in their account to spend, and they're going to spend more government money. So, for example, like a stimulus package. So a few years ago, there was a Cash for Clunkers program after we got into a great recession in 2008. All right, so we're going to speed the economy up. And on the other side of that, if the economy is doing well, we're going to slow it down. All right, so let's go back to speed just for a second. All right, so if we're speeding the economy up, that means we are in a recession, and we want to get out of it, hit that trough, and get back up to an expansion as quickly as possible. All right, now on the other side of that is slowing the economy down. That means we're doing well, we're in an expansion, and we want to expand as slowly as humanly possible so that we can avoid being in a recession for too long. So we want to expand for as long as possible, hit that peak, zoom through our recession, then go back slowly through an expansion. All right, so we're going to raise taxes, spend less government money, and make sure that there is less money flowing around the economy. So that way we stay in an expansion for a longer amount of time. All right, and that has been Economic Indicators Part 2.